All right, so good morning. Welcome to our third lesson and our final lesson for week 7. Um, so, as promised in previous lessons leading up to today, we're going to look at task 14 today, which is about how to document your prototype with the use of video. So, um, I guess to to I- to locate rather is the word I was looking for. Task 14. Share the Blackboard course with you. So in the subject content section, unit 2 obviously is where we're at. And even though it's in reference to the prototype, it's actually in the evaluating section because I guess, it is the start of the evaluation process, in the sense of that you're, demonstrating how well your product works and what works, what doesn't. All right. And so within the assessment tasks, you'll see task 14, prototype demo video. That link will allow you to download the file. And because I've already had my other year 11 class this morning, I've already done that. So as you can see with task 14, there's not that much to it really. It's just recording a demonstration of your generated prototype. So highlighting any key requirements for your proposed digital solution. Um, so the video needs to be less than 4 minutes in length. All right, so I guess if you want to ask the question, is there a minimum? The task sheet says between 2 and 4 minutes. So essentially, if it's less than 2 minutes, you probably haven't got the level of complexity in your explanation or your solution, and obviously its explanation. If it's over 4 minutes, um, just like if your word or your page count is over the 10 A3 pages or the 8 A4 pages or whatever's specified on the task sheet, if your video is over 4 minutes in length, you don't get any credit for any functionality discussed after that. So if you're talking for 15, 20 minutes about, oh, this is all the great stuff that my application does, all right, you're only going to get credit for whatever you talk about in those first 4 minutes. So, it's short and sharp, but, still having enough detail to show what works, what doesn't work, what the next steps in the process are. All right, once you've done that, also look at preparing a written transcript. So a transcript is just a way of, or a document which contains what you've said in the video. All right, and the reason why you'd want to produce that is if, for example, your submission is selected as a sample when we go for confirming your results in IA2 or IA3. There's also, well, there's videos in all the assessments to be fair. But yeah, if your submission is selected, all right, and you send the video, and for whatever reason there's some issues with the audio, all right, and whoever's confirming your mark can't hear the audio, all right, and they don't have a transcript to go off of, they might say, well, we can't justify that mark that's been given. All right, so yeah, so once you've recorded the video, you can prepare that. I know some people do it the opposite way, but we'll talk about that a bit later. All right, so in terms of, what this video should look like, because I'm not the most prepared, I've got a couple of different, I guess, code examples that I can present. So we'll just do a couple of live versions of the video. And if, yeah, I get a bit smart, I might actually cut these out and try to use them in the future. I know the ones this morning still had little issues and stuff as well. So I guess part of doing that is to highlight some of those errors for you. Yeah, so yeah, so I guess in terms of what we're looking for, um, actually what I'll do is I'll sort of do one first. So I'll do two versions. Basically, one will be for a scenario where you've got some stuff, but it doesn't work or it all doesn't work together, and that sort of thing, and how you can sort of talk through that. And then the second one is for more where, everything is working well and you got to try to cover everything in that amount of time. All right. And maybe in between, after the first one, I'll talk about some of the things that I tried to focus on, and that sort of thing, just to break it up a little bit. All right. But just get myself organized here because I need my few little notes. And also need to share the screen. All right, so what I'm sharing on the screen is basically what is going to be captured in the video. All right, hence the reason why I'm sharing it on the screen. All right, here we go. Okay, so my project that I was tasked with was to create a login module, which could be incorporated into a range of different digital solutions as a way of providing an authentication of the users of that system. So currently, my prototype brings up a login screen, and when I pass in some credentials in the form of a username and password and submit them, you can see that the username and password appear in the console. So that's telling me that Python has accepted those variables in from my interface, or those values, I should say, in from my interface, and have saved them in a variable which I can then manipulate. All right, so the current code that I have consists of the main Python file, which is used to run the application, as well as some of the basic functionality, as well as my Kiwi file, which contains all of the interface elements and how they're positioned within the interface. I also have created a Python library in order to verify those user details when they log in. So in my main Python file, I've created an application window as an object, as well as a grid screen, which allows us to collect the username and password. And then we also have a method for this object when we press the button. In my Kiwi code, I've used a series of grid layouts to ensure the positioning of my elements is as close to my interface design as possible. All right, included some colors and other features, but the main objects are the label as well as the text inputs, which are used to get the user input, as well as the button. And when we press the button, it runs the pressed action or the press method back in our Python object. So currently, all this does is print the username and password from the interface. However, in the future, we would like to look at incorporating the login method. So the login method has been written to take in a user list, and this user list we would ultimately like to get from our database. So then it cycles through each user in that user list to see if the username and password that we've been provided matches to that particular user. And if it does, we're going to have a login success. And if there's an error, it will return a relevant message depending on whether it was the username or the password which created the error. As I talked about, the user list, we do want to derive from a database. We have developed the database, which currently consists of two tables. However, the relevant table we would like to use is the logins table. And as you can see, we've created a list of sample users and passwords for testing purposes. So if we would like to generate this data as our user list for clarify or for testing against in our algorithm. All right, so I wasn't exactly watching the time there, so I think I got within the 4-minute range. All right, but I guess the point of showing you that is, obviously I've got some different bits of code. We've talked about all of these and obviously put them all together. But I mean, for some students, I know that's the case of that it doesn't really, you've got all the pieces, but haven't quite got it worked out together. All right, which is perfectly okay. All right, but as long as you can justify, the code that you've got and why you've got it, as well as explain, how you would proceed going forward. So, I talked about, generating the user list from the database. Here's the data I want. I just haven't got it into the Python code yet. All right, or here's my algorithm, but currently, it's just printing the values to show that they're in the Python ready to go. All right, I just need to connect them up. That's fine. All right, because again, if you look at the criteria for the generation, right, in terms of how the wording that's used, all right, we've got adequate, effective, purposeful. All right, so that's going from lowest to highest. All right, so I mean, if you've got this code and you're explaining how it's supposed to work, that's definitely adequate. And depending on how much you've got of it that is working, you could argue that it's up into effective territory. All right, maybe in this case, because there's no real connection yet, it'd probably still be adequate. All right, but I mean, it's not going to be partial. I think is the sort of lowest level one, because of the fact that I've talked about its purpose and how it fits together. All right. Obviously, if it is all working, we do want to talk about its purpose and how it fits in with our solution. So that's what we're going to, how we get to that particular level, which I'll go through in a minute. But I'll just stop sharing this for a minute. All right, so as I said, just wanted to cover off, some of the things that I talked about, and I suppose some of the things that we're looking for. So I haven't prepared a slide for this. I just had a sticky note. So not a lot of energy's gone into the notes for this, but like I said, I'm going to try to put together something a bit more substantial for reference later. All right, so in terms of my video notes, you'll start by noticing I haven't done a full-blown script. All right, it's just these are the key things that I want to make sure I'm covering. And I mean, if you follow this guide, you'll go pretty close to having a successful prototype demonstration as well. So I mean, I had the task is to create a login module. All right, but you start off with that brief. The task is to, create whatever it is you need to create. So I'll even put that in. So it is to create ... You fill in the blanks. All right. So, and again, the purpose for this is, while you understand what the problem is, and when I'm initially marking your project, I understand what the purpose is. If for whatever reason your sample was sent away for a confirmation result, the person looking at it probably doesn't really fully understand what the context is. So if you're describing that to them, that's going to help them understand, okay, I sort of have an idea what we should be looking for. So once you've created that, and again, some people do this in a different order, but generally I like to show the current level of functionality. All right, so show them what the application can do. But then, bring it back to the code and say, here's the code that makes it work. And obviously you've got more time and space in your documentation to explain it in detail. You don't have to go through line by line, explaining this line does this line does that. Again, just trying to hit those key aspects of it. And, then if you've got any other code snippets that, are not currently part of the functionality, but you've done, and, the plan is to bring them in, that's a good opportunity to do that. And then discussing those future improvements. So what's the next step from where the project currently is? All right, because even if you've got everything functioning and everything works the way it should, there's always something that can be improved upon, whether it's additional functionality, whether it's, in my next example, it'll be refactoring the code because it's a bit disorganized and disjointed, those sorts of things. All right, so just realized I didn't click that so you can actually see the change made. All right, and I guess, in terms of timing, so you might be saying, well, how do we fit all this in 4 minutes? So I reckon you probably only really need a minute for those first two things. All right, so like I said, you don't have to go all the way back through. The task was to create this, and so we did a mind map and we did a activity diagram. We did this, that, and the other. All right, that's all in your documentation. This is purely discussing your prototype that you've generated. All right, the code that you've completed. All right, so the task was to create this. Here's the current level of functionality we have. So as you can see here, it does this, that, the other. All right, come back to the code and say, well, this is how it comes together. Those other code snippets. So, I mean, yeah, so those first couple of points are going to take up, the first minute or thereabouts of your presentation or your demonstration, I should say. The code and that sort of stuff. And like I showed you in my database file with the table and the values in the table. All right, so all of that stuff is probably going to take up the majority of your time. So probably 2 minutes in the middle there. All right, and then those future improvements are, perhaps in the last minute. If you don't have many, obviously, the reason why is you're probably going to have a lot of code. So, you borrow a bit from there and add it to your explanation of the code and those key algorithms or the key data tables, that sort of thing. Yeah, so there's a little bit of fluidity there, but generally speaking, a minute, 2 minutes, 1 minute at the end. All right, so I'll leave this up here for another minute if you're still, copying this down or if you want to take a little screen grab. As I said, I don't have this prepared somewhere else for your reference just yet, but I am going to work on that. And then what we'll do is we'll have another look. Like I said, we'll do a bit more of a detailed code example. And again, you can probably have a bit of a look, make sure I'm ticking off these things as I go. And then we'll talk about some of the general sort of how do we put this together stuff. All right, sorry about that. I was just trying to get some coffee in, and then one of the things we'll talk about with presentation notes is don't have milky drinks before you want to talk a lot because they'll close up your throat pretty quick. So just had to have some water as well. All right, but I'll bring back the screen and we'll go through, like I said, another example for maybe a fuller, more complete prototype. So our task was to create a login module, which is designed for interaction with a range of different digital solutions. The purpose of the login module is to provide authentication for users of a particular system using a password to verify who they are. So you can see with our current prototype, we have text boxes available for adding in a username and password combination. If it's unsuccessful, we do get a password error here in the console. However, once we have a correct combination of username and password, it then takes us to the next page. So as a placeholder, we've just got a welcome message with the username so that we've passed the user's data into this screen and then could use it however we wish to for a particular solution. We also have a logout button, which takes us back to the login platform so that we can then re-log in as we need to. So how this prototype has come together is through the use of 5 different files. We have our main Python file, which drives the building of the interface application, as well as holding the key interface objects. We have the Kiwi file, which holds the objects within each of those main screen objects and allows us to add labels, text boxes, buttons for interaction by the user. And then we have 2 library files. So we have our objects library, which contains all of our objects, their attributes and their methods that we require as per our class diagram, as well as our database library, which contains a series of database connection and SQL query methods to allow us to perform different SQL actions within our database. We also have a users database, which currently contains 2 tables. The main table that we use though is the logins table, which contains username and password information that we want to test against. So when we run our main code, we start off by building the database, build the application window. And we also run a database setup, which connects us to our database, gives us the option of creating tables if we wish to, as well as generating the screen object. So the My Grid screen is the main screen that we're using, and its elements are defined within the Kiwi file. So we have text boxes or text inputs for the username and the password, as well as a button, which when pressed runs our pressed method. So our press method, when we press the button, it takes in the values of the text boxes, creates a user with that, and then allows us to run the login method for that particular user. You'll notice also that it uses the get users method from the database library to generate the user list. So if we have a look at that get users method, it runs an SQL statement which simply passes the username and passwords from the login, the logins table. And then for each row within that SQL result, turns the username and password into a dictionary, which we can then access from a list of those dictionaries to form our user list. So then our login method takes that user list that we've just developed from the get users method, and for each user in the user list, checks that the username and password matches up to our particular user's username and password. If they do, we get a true result. If there's an error, we get a false result. And upon running that method, if we do have a true login success, we then move to the second screen, which currently just presents the text, takes the text from the main screen, adds it to a bit of a string, and prints that onto the screen. In terms of future improvements, while it does meet all the functionality requirements that we've been asked of or have been asked of us, we could still look at refactoring some code, particularly around the database setup and some of these other actions within the screens, as the main purpose of the main function is purely just to run the application. We should have most of our other methods and objects within separate libraries for accessing different projects. All right, so I sort of stumbled towards the end there, which sort of ties in well with the next point I wanted to make. But you can see in that example, because we had more time to discuss the code and the functionality because there was more there, it sort of took away a bit from the recommendations. All right, and again, I wasn't exactly watching the time, but if I was recording this and going back and checking on it, I'd make sure that I was getting to time. All right, but in terms of, that's all well and good, but how do we apply that to our project? All right, so a few pointers just around putting together your presentation. All right, and the first thing that I always suggest, and you can sort of see based on the fact that there was a few stumbles and slip ups throughout that. Oh, there we go. So don't just do one take. All right. I know there's a temptation of spending as much time as humanly possible on getting the code right and then going, oh, yeah, I've got to record a 4-minute video before I submit it. So I'll do that and I'll submit it. Excuse me. But as you can see from me trying to do it live in class, that, you do stumble and slip up along the way. Or, you have a sudden urge to sneeze or something like that. Or, sometimes your brain just goes completely blank halfway through. All right. So, it's pretty rare that someone smashes it out of the park in one take. We can always tell the people that have done it in one take when they submit their videos. Because as I said, there is a lot of stumbling and pausing and like, oh, I've got to click there. Yep. Okay. I can continue now sort of thing. All right. And I guess also when you are making those little stumbles and errors and stuff, it's taking away time from your video. So, if you spend half a minute with all those stumbles over the 4 minutes, you've only really got 3.5 minutes of content there. So that's the first one is to, don't just do it in one take. I guess the second point we've already touched on as well. That is have a plan with what you're going to say. It's not to say that you have to have a fully written script. All right, so as I said before, some people do the reverse of the two tasks that we've got for task 14. Right, they'll write the transcript first, or they'll write the script word for word, and then they'll sit there and read it word for word. All right, and I don't know if you've ever seen someone do that before, but even if you're watching them, or I guess even if you're not watching them, you have your eyes closed while they're reading off a script word for word, you'll very quickly be able to hear that they're reading word for word. All right, there's definitely a vibe that comes off when you're reading from a script. And usually a lot of that's got to do with the next point I'll make as well. But I mean, if you're truly trying to show your understanding of your prototype and its functionality and what the code is doing, you shouldn't have to read it word for word. You should be able to explain it in a very natural sounding manner. All right. And so the third point, and like I said, it ties in with the second point too. So there is sort of a little flow on of these. But I think the right way of wording it. Excuse me, there we go. So the third thing, and this, I guess, a lot of this comes from my experience of almost 5 years of teaching to a computer, but act as though you're presenting live. All right. So, it might feel a bit awkward or uncomfortable for you guys if this is the first time that you've done something like this, because you're basically talking to a computer, all right? Because you're obviously watching the screen, trying to watch what you're doing, all right? And then you're just sort of narrating what's going on over the top. All right. But what I find is even though I'm only looking at a list of names on the screen. If I'm sitting here talking as though you're sitting at a desk in front of me at your computer, or you've got your laptop there, whatever, the visual side of it doesn't matter too much. All right, but if I'm talking to you as though you're actually sitting here in the room with me, I find that the information and I guess, being able to understand what I'm saying comes through a lot clearer. All right, because currently, and I could probably do this on the webcam so you can sort of even see it live. I probably should have done this with the other class, to be fair. Bit of a rare opportunity to see the mug on the cam. All right, why did that not work? Okay, it doesn't have my. Oh, there you go. Turn the webcam off, but turn the microphone on. Webcam on, but the microphone off. So I was just saying, I'm obviously not talking to the screen that you're seeing me from. So the laptop screen's over here. Yeah, I'll make sure I'm looking at the right thing. But yeah, the screen that it's got all your names and stuff on is over here. All right, and then a bit further around is the screen with all the code. All right, but when I'm talking to you guys and presenting you information, all right, I'm looking at the screen as though it's actually you guys there. So you can probably tell there's a bit of gesturing going on, saying there you are, there you are, there you are, there that is. All right. And also, I'm sitting up fairly straight, shoulders back. I could do a bit more posturizing, get it a bit better. All right. But again, if you're reading from a script and you're really not sure and you start to hunch down and you're looking down at your sheet and then, oh, this is the next line that I have to say. Oh, I lost where I was supposed to be. Yep, here we are. Okay. So the next thing I have to say is this. It sounds completely different, and that comes through when people are looking at your recordings. All right, so as much as possible, and like I said, it's a bit weird at first, like you feel like a bit of a goose talking at a computer, particularly in the staff room. If you look around, like there's other teachers doing it, but the fact is they can hear you talking to the computer, and you feel a bit silly at first, but once you get used to it, and like I said, you pretend like you're actually talking to students, it's not a problem. So I'm going to go bring back the notes. So I don't know why I didn't think of that before. Get on the webcam to explain that one. That's a genius idea. Although I can get rid of that dodgy webcam I've got on the mounted on top of the cubicle. All right. So yeah, so they're probably the three big things I'd suggest is don't try and do it in one take. Have a couple of goes at it. All right. Even if you practice it before you record it, that's fine. All right. Don't sort of just go, oh, okay, this is my one go at it, and then I don't care. Because again, you might miss stuff or you might slip up and forget something, and that could cost you a mark, which could be potentially useful. All right, have a plan. Like I said, it doesn't have to be a full script, and if anything, I would suggest don't do a full script. All right, I mean, start with the notes, these sort of sectional things. If you want to break it down to make sure, when you talk about the code, maybe make sure you list, oh, yeah, I want to talk about my main code and those two objects. I want to talk about my object library, my database library, and those methods within the database library, that sort of thing, and any future improvements as well. So, you might want to say, well, next time I want to make sure that the database connects to my code and algorithms, or I might just be, I'll have to refactor the code because it's a bit messy, but it functions. That's all I had time for. That's great. But try to have a bit of a plan and an outline. And like I said, you sort of exude that confidence by being able to fill in the gaps and not have to read word for word what you said. I mean, if you absolutely have to, that's fine. But again, try to practice it without it. This is essentially a free swing at it. All right. So have a go, see how you go with it. And then, we can always talk about improvements going forward. It's the whole point of these formative assessments. All right. But then in terms of the actual presentation, when you're talking at the computer, all right, try to pretend that you're actually talking to people in the class. It'll sound more natural. It'll just, it'll be clearer and louder because you're probably, like I said, sitting up straighter and as though, someone's actually watching you do it. I mean, for some people, the thought of someone watching them do a speech is nerve-wracking and terrifying. So maybe don't take on those aspects of it, but just more, this is my project. This is, what I've been working on. This is where I've got to. So I'm going to tell you all about it. All right. So maybe, like pick someone, like I said, if you don't want to picture, talking in front of a heap of people, pick, a family member or a friend, and feel like, they have a genuine interest in what you've been doing. All right. So if you visualize them, that's going to get you in that right mindset. All right. I guess the only other bit I wanted to cover is the question that concerns, that's all well and good, sir, but how do we actually record the prototype? So, in terms of the software and that side of things. So I guess the big answer is there's heaps of different ways of doing it. And generally I find that, students already have experience with recording video and that sort of thing, maybe not necessarily in this context, but the number of students I've met that already have YouTube channels from like streaming games and things like that, I usually bow down to their intelligence on these sorts of things. But, I guess I got to give people some starting point for those of us that don't have that experience. But in saying that, and I've lost my screen, there it is. Just bring it back. So in where you got that assessment task from, if you go back into the evaluating data-driven solutions and into the additional resources, right, you'll see that there's some documents and even a little video prepared talking about some of those aspects of video creation. So so the video recording links I'll show you in just a minute. It shows you some different options around, the actual recording of your screen and some more of those presentation tips and that if you want to go a bit more in depth on, building up your skills in that domain. But also some stuff around compressing video. So there is also a size limit with the video. And I can't remember what the actual number is off the top of my head. So I do have to find that out and get back to people. But, we don't necessarily need a 4K presentation of your proposed prototype. As long as it's not completely grainy and can see fairly clearly what's going on, that's fine. All right, but if for whatever reason you do have to compress the video down, there's a couple options there. We use Handbrake here at the school for any time we put videos into, say, Blackboard or something, because there is a limit on Blackboard. So you can definitely recommend Handbrake. I've never really tried the VLC method, but I've used VLC for some other video stuff. It's been really good, so can recommend that. And then also that last one is probably more so for the IA1, where we're doing a longer presentation and a lot of people tend to prepare it on PowerPoint. So we'll cut back to that next term. But as I said, in terms of that recording links document, we'll just have a quick look at that to show you some of the options there. So some presentation tips and narration tips. So yeah, so ignore the tips about you being on camera. So you don't have to show your face. I know that's sometimes a bit of anxiety for people. All right. If you want to, you probably could do like a little, your face in the corner, but you don't want it to detract from the code and the prototype. And yeah, pay more attention to the technical tips in that one. So there you go. That's helpful. So some narration tips. I didn't cover off all of these. So find a quiet place to record. So you don't want the background noise and that sort of thing as well. Obviously, I don't have a choice in this environment, given that we all the teachers sit in like a call center style setup. You just got to deal with what's going on around you. Script your narration. So again, you don't have to have it word for word, but have a plan. Yeah, so create a professional tone by smile. Yeah, so that's another thing. If you're like smiling and happy as you talk, it definitely sounds a lot better if you're all, gloomy and upset when you're recording, or angry and frustrated. Right, comes off in a different manner. Part of the reason why I try to have fun while we're here. So be succinct and avoid filler words, and I just use the R there. I caught myself. So things like, and then yeah, like this, and then it's like that, and like how good's this. Try to avoid those where you can. Listen back to your recording. Again, this is the bit people don't like. All right, but again, don't just do one take. Try to have a couple of goes at it, and have water available. As I said, if you're smashing a coffee to get your caffeine energy levels up, the milkiness of it can destroy your throat. So especially when you're trying to talk constantly for 4 minutes. So try to drink water. Tea is another common one. Like race and sporting commentators and stuff. That's what they use in between their short little breaks to keep their throats lubricated, ready to roll. So also some links there for things like screen recording. So if you have a Windows 10 or Windows 11 computer, there's already a way of doing screen recording, so you don't even have to download software. If not, there is some suggestions on this website, or the OpenShot, I think is the one that I've looked at in the past, because it's open source and it does everything. I think there's even a bit of video editing in that as well, so it sort of covers all bases. Yeah, so that's a little starting point. Like I said, there's a few different options there on that Tech Radar site, so check them out and uh, have a yeah have a play around. You might find one that you prefer to use or don't like. Again, we're not testing you on your ability to screen capture and edit your videos. It's not a video assessment. It's really just for you to show the functionality of your prototype. All right, but is there any questions or comments about that? Probably went a little bit longer than the other class, so apologies for that. Just move everything back the way it was. All right, doesn't look like there's anything coming through, so at least now you've got that information. So I guess the last 20 minutes we've got of the lesson is time where you can continue working on your project, or if you've got any questions that you need answered or assistance with, feel free to ask. Um, Otherwise, like I said, I've done enough talking for one day. I'll let you get in and have a go. All right, grade 11. We've only got 5 minutes left of our scheduled session. So last chance to ask any questions or make any comments, share any thoughts before we wrap it up for another week. Thanks for the feedback, Herman. Appreciate that. Thanks, Cody, for that feedback. I suppose if there isn't anything, we'll wrap it up there. So, as always, thank you very much for your attendance and participation. Enjoy the rest of your day. Enjoy your weekend as much as you can if you're studying the whole time. And we'll see you on Monday.